Hey everyone, so we've talked about disappointing teams in the Western Conference. Now let's get on to part 2, where we talk about disappointing teams in the Eastern Conference. Before we get into the video, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please give this video a thumbs up, hit that like button, it greatly helps out the channel. And if you're new, to please hit that subscribe button, follow along for all my hockey content this season and all year round. So what better place to start with disappointing teams in the Eastern Conference than with the first team to make a coaching change this season, the Toronto Maple Leafs. This was supposed to be a huge year for Toronto. They lost in the first round again last year to Boston. There's 3 straight years of first round exits, and this was supposed to be the year that Toronto finally took the next step. They finally were a team that could make a deep playoff run, contend for a Stanley Cup, and really show significant improvement and show that they're a team that, with all that talent on the roster, could be a Stanley Cup level team. This regular season has been a disaster, quite frankly, so far for Toronto. They're 10-10-4 outside of the playoff picture right now through 24 games. They fired Mike Babcock just a couple of days ago as the head coach. Sheldon Keefe has come up from the AHL and taken over at the NHL level. And, you know, he won his first game as head coach. We often see when teams make coaching changes that they're very, very good in the next few weeks. Following that coaching change, the big question comes, do they continue that quick success, or do they go back to where they were after a couple of weeks? Obviously, this just happened, so that remains to be seen with Toronto. But Toronto so far this season, injuries have played a role. John Tavares missed significant time. Mitch Marner's missed significant time. But this was a team that Kyle Dubas made all these changes to the defense in the offseason, made major trades, brought in Tyson Barrie, who has not been good, brought in Cody Ceci, who's been abysmal in his own end, which really isn't surprising. But these supposed defensive improvements have not really been defensive improvements. Toronto's already given up 82 goals this season in 24 games. That is pretty brutal. And even with an offense as talented and as dynamic as Toronto's, they haven't been able to keep up. They've scored 76 goals, so their goal differential is negative. It's -6 right now. They've been a terrible road team, only 4-7 on the road this season. For a team that was supposed to show Stanley Cup potential, Toronto has had a very, very bad start. And I think, them firing Babcock shows that they know they've got to start turning this around right now, or they're going to get left behind in that Atlantic Division. And you look at teams like Boston, who's off to a great start this season. Florida is playing very, very well and pulled themselves up into a top 3 spot. Montreal, in my mind, has been surprisingly good this season. Then you have, Toronto and Tampa Bay both kind of squandering there, and you have Ottawa playing better than expected. And Buffalo, while I think they're headed in the wrong direction, still right now between Toronto and Ottawa in the standings. So that Atlantic Division is kind of all stacked on top of each other. And Toronto is finding themselves as a middle-of-the-road team right now, and they are certainly supposed to be better than that. So moving on, another Atlantic Division team that's been pretty disappointing to start this year is the Tampa Bay Lightning. I just mentioned them. They've played less games than pretty much everyone else. They've only played 19 games this season, and that is, we have teams that have played 24 or 25 at this point. So that certainly plays a role in where they are in the standings, but they are only 10-7-2 to start the year. 22 points, is currently sitting 4 points out of a playoff spot. And this is a team that, I really thought was going to come out firing on all cylinders this season. We all know what happened in the playoffs last year. They had a 62-win regular season. They were a dominant team, President's Trophy, blew the rest of the league away, really. And then they go in the playoffs and get swept in the first round, and it does not get any more embarrassing than that. It doesn't really get any worse than that. I think you're better off missing the playoffs overall rather than making the playoffs and then as a 1 seed getting swept in the first round. I don't think it really gets any worse than that. So I thought they were going to come out this season with a serious chip on their shoulder, ready to go out there and dominate the league again and show them that what happened in the playoffs was just a fluke and that they really are a great, dominant NHL team and a Stanley Cup contending NHL team. They've not gotten off to a great start this season. Obviously, they're above 500. They've played less games. So once you factor in those games in hand, they're probably in a playoff spot at this point. But 10-7-2 is pretty disappointing in my mind for Tampa Bay. I thought, they'd be at, 13, 14 wins already. And obviously, they have plenty of time to turn it around, and they certainly have the roster to turn it around. You look at that roster on paper, and they should be one of, if not the best team in the league. And I'm not necessarily overall worried about the Lightning. I do think that they do make the playoffs this year and that they're going to kind of get things headed back in the right direction. But these first few months haven't exactly been what I thought we were going to see from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I got a couple more here from the East. One is the New York Rangers. And, I didn't have high expectations for the Rangers this year. I think they were very overhyped coming into this season. I think, obviously, adding Artemi Panarin is a good move and brings in a high-caliber, talented star player to that Rangers team. And trading for Jacob Trouba, I think, really sets them up on the back end to have Brady Shea and Jacob Trouba kind of lead that defense core going forward. I think those were nice moves, but those weren't the kind of moves that were going to instantly turn the Rangers from a rebuilding team to a deep playoff run team, or even a playoff team in general. I don't think the Rangers are going to make the playoffs this year, but a lot of people looked at those moves and thought the Rangers are ready right now. And there were high expectations for New York heading into this season, and a lot of people picked them to be a playoff team, particularly a wild card playoff team. And so far, they're only 500 through 20 games, 9-9-2. And I don't think that's the start that those people that picked them to be a playoff team were really expecting. Now, for me personally, I'm not surprised that the Rangers are only a 500 team. They're still very, very young. They're relying heavily on young players. Mika Zibanejad has missed a decent amount of time. He's still out with an injury, and anytime you lose your top line center, that's going to be a big hit to the team. And certainly a team like the Rangers, who aren't necessarily loaded with talent, still relying on a lot of young up-and-coming players, and need guys like Panarin and Zibanejad to produce at a high level for them to win games. Having Zibanejad out of the lineup has been a real hindrance for New York. But they're still finding ways to play decent. They're okay. They're not a good road team. They're only 3-5 on the road. They play better at home. But I think overall, for a team that a lot of people did have as a potential playoff team this year, being the third to last team in the Eastern Conference right now is pretty disappointing for the New York Rangers. I think they would at least like to be ahead of teams like Columbus and Ottawa and Buffalo, and they're not right now. The only two teams worse than the Rangers so far are the Devils and the Red Wings. So, speaking of the Devils, they are my final huge disappointment in the Eastern Conference right now. And the Devils were a team that I did pick to make the playoffs. They were kind of my hot take pick to make the playoffs this year. And boy, has it been a massive disappointment this season for New Jersey. I think John Hines very well could be the next coach to get fired. Their goaltending and overall team defense has been absolutely atrocious. They've given up 78 goals in 21 games. They're 7-10-4 on the season, and this is a team that people thought, would be a playoff caliber team. They made all these moves in the offseason, trading for PK Subban and adding him to that defense core, signing Wayne Simmons in free agency, drafting Jack Hughes 1 overall. This looked like a team that was primed to make a playoff run. And adding some guys like Simmons and Subban was supposed to push them over the edge and take them from being a last-place team that they were last year and into a potential playoff contender. That has not been the case at all. This team's still in last place in the Metro Division. Huge disappointment. Minus 26 goal differential already on the season. That is brutal. Absolutely brutal. their goaltending has been horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Corey Schneider got waived, sent to the AHL. $6 million contract, waived to the AHL because he's been so bad. He was giving up over 4.5 goals per game. Now Mackenzie Blackwood is the starter. He's been playing better as of late, but he got off to a just as bad start for New Jersey at the beginning of the season. Louis Domingue's been called up to be the backup. I do not trust that goaltending duo to take New Jersey anywhere. The overall team defense, it's not all on the goalies. The overall team defense has been absolutely awful. And, the New Jersey's sitting in last place in their division because of it. So this was a team that I think was very hyped up after the offseason that they had. I bought into the hype with them. I thought that we were going to see significant improvement out of New Jersey. And it's been anything but for the Devils. They are still absolutely horrendous. And they're not a team that I think is really going anywhere right now. So those are my 4 disappointments from the Eastern Conference: Toronto and Tampa Bay in the Atlantic Division. Although I do think that Toronto and Tampa Bay are able to turn it around and end up making the playoffs this season. And the Rangers and New Jersey from the Metro Division, I really don't have faith in either of those teams to be a playoff team this year. And while they were pretty hyped up going into the season, I think that they're proving so far this year that they are not all that they were hyped up to be, and that they still have a ways to go in the rebuilding process. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.